If you think talking about mental illness is scary, imagine what happens when we don't talk about it. Join the conversation. Visit letstalkstigma.org.
Hello, I'm Karl Shallowhorn, board member for the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition. And on behalf of the coalition, I would like to welcome you to the 7th in our series of Facebook Live events, this time focusing on the state of stigma, back to college, supporting your students' mental health. For many young people, going to college is a time full of expectation and excitement, but it's also a time when many mental health conditions manifest. The age of onset for severe mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and bipolar disorder is 18 to 25. Also, many students arrive at college with pre-existing conditions that impact their ability to thrive in an often stressful environment. And now, with the impact of COVID, the mental well-being of college students is even more challenged, whether it be through the year and a half of a virtual learning environment to the recent transition to in-person classes. Finally, students living with mental health challenges have faced stigma in many ways on campuses, whether it be from faculty, staff, or other students. This has forced many of them to not reach out to help, which in some cases can be life-saving. So today we're going to be exploring this topic with 5 individuals who have different perspectives. Before I introduce our panelists, here are a few housekeeping rules. Our program is for 1 hour. During the course of this time, if you have a question or comment, please type into the text box and we'll respond accordingly. Today I'm joined by first Sue Mann Dolce, who is Associate Director of the UB Accessibility Resources Office. Sue's PhD in rehabilitation science and clinical background in occupational therapy support the participation consultation model she developed and uses in her work with disabled students at UB, including students with mental health issues. Research and program evaluation interests include participation, disability studies, collaborative programming, and universal design and programming, including universal design yoga. Sue started doing yoga as an undergraduate student in the 1970s to support her mental health and well-being. Living with a mental health diagnosis informed Sue's interest in mental health support, advocacy, and activism. Next, we have Kerry Spicer, who is the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Daemen College. Kerry has 18 years of experience in student affairs at both public and private institutions and has a passion for education and holistic care of students. Kerry is the co-chair of the Daemen College Care Team and oversees community standards and student advocacy, the CHIP Center, Counseling, Health, Insurance, and Prevention, and Housing and Residence Life. A winner of the Edward R. Beanie Drake ACUI Founders Award and the Christine A. Churgi ACUI Region 7 Award. She is a champion of the true student experience on a college campus. Students are a joy and inspiration to her, and the driving force behind Kerry's energy and enthusiasm. Kerry is certified as a safe zone trainer and as well as a nonviolent conflict reconciliation trainer. She serves as a leader on the campus's emergency response team and in the discussion around student advocacy on the college campus. Kerry holds an undergraduate degree in psychology and women's studies from SUNY Fredonia, a graduate degree in student personal administration from Buffalo State College, and is working on her doctorate through Drexel University's School of Education. Also joining us today is Frances Moyer. Frances has been employed with SUNY Erie Community College since 1995 and took the position of counselor for students with disabilities in the Student Access Center in 2002. She's the co-chair of the mental health program with JED campus and assisted the college to become the first community college to join the membership of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition. She's a certified QPR trainer and trains students, staff, and faculty to recognize persons at risk and lead them to help. Frances was the founder of a character program at the college to improve the mental well-being of students and employees by recognizing and honoring positive character traits of the college population and community. Frances has been a licensed mental health counselor since 2006. She's operated her own private practice since 1998, where she offers marriage, education, family, and individual counseling. Frances is a member of the American Counseling Association, the New York Mental Health Counselors Association, JED Campus, the American Association of Mental Health Counselors, NABITA, and the American Psychological Association. She's been a past board member for the Character Council of West New York and the Erie County Office of Persons with Disabilities. Frances is vice president for the Hamburg Lions Club and a teacher for adult education classes at the Watermark Wesleyan Church in Hamburg. Next, we have Brooke Ketterer, who is a 2-year graduate student from Niagara Falls Culinary Institute and was a previous patient at Bryland Hospital. Over the course of her journey, Brooke learned through her lived experience and with the help of others how to successfully complete college. She's now working full-time as a pastry chef at her family's storefront bakery and is paying it forward as much as possible through her career. And last, but certainly not least, we're joined by Anita Ketterer, who is the proud mother of Brooke, with whom she has the pleasure of working. She is co-owner and baker at Sweet Indulgence Bakery and Dessert Food Truck. Anita states, "Going through my experience with Brooke, I now make it my life's mission to stop the stigma of mental health. Our bakery pays it forward by choosing one coalition a year, in which part of our proceeds goes to mental health. You'll find green ribbons on our truck and in our store to spread awareness and to start a conversation." So thank you and welcome everyone to our discussion today. So this is a question I'm going to start off, and this one is for I'm going to start with Kerry, Sue, Fran, and Brooke, and we'll just start off maybe with Kerry. I'm going to ask, so what are some of the reasons you believe there's an issue with stigma around students and mental health? So Kerry, what do you think about that?
I think that there's probably a lot of different answers to that question, and I'm sure my peers will offer a lot of insight as well. I think that students are bringing ideas and thoughts around mental health and mental health supports with them to the college campus. I have found, as we see statistically in our counseling center, that services usage is increasing year after year by leaps and bounds, I would say. So while I see that there is potentially a stigma, we are seeing service increase. So I think that folks just have certain ideas of what mental health support is. There's ideas that it could be cost prohibitive, thoughts that perhaps it's not bad enough, and I'm going to use quotation fingers on that, and that perhaps that it's not truly confidential. So a lot of groundwork around trust and what the system looks like, breaking down some of those barriers of cost and thoughts in folks' heads about mental health support is really critical to the work that I do right from the very beginning of the college experience.
Sue, how about your thoughts? I think you're still muted, Sue.
I have to do that at least 3 times a day. It's where I'm not really at work. So anyway, thanks, Kerry. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. We're seeing the same things at UB. The other thing that a lot of, there's 2 other points I wanted to make is that I think a lot of people assume that having a mental health diagnosis means you're not capable. They perceive it as a deficit, that there's something wrong with you, as opposed to a variation in human functioning that can change over time, and that with support is just actually another way of being in the world. Of course, when you're in extreme situations related to mental health issues, it doesn't always feel that way, and we understand that and support that. But it's really important that we change the framework of what does it mean to have a mental health issue? What does it mean to have mental wellness? So some of these are about ways that we're thinking and talking about mental health as well as mental health issues. The second thing I want to say is that because I work in our accessibility resources office, is a lot of people, especially on college campuses, don't really understand the relationship between having a mental health diagnosis and having a disability. And so I think that that's a really important thing to understand, especially in higher ed, because there tends to be a certain amount of stress in these environments. I think everyone might agree on that. And so not that there's not stress everywhere, but we know that stress often can magnify mental health issues in varying ways. So thinking about if you have a mental health diagnosis, you may not have a disability. What would differentiate you if, as a person with a mental health issue, is that if you have some kind of variance in your mental functioning, cognitive and or psychological, that limits you in a major life activity such as learning, that would then qualify as a disability, and then you could work with our office to get academic accommodations and other supports. So we work very closely with our UB counseling services, with campus living, with campus life, so that we're all working together in this collaborative framework to message similarly about mental health issues. So I think those are really important things, but it's still, there is a lot of stigma in the culture, and students are hearing that and experiencing that on social media. So there's a realness to it, and we do have to talk about the reality of the stigma that's still a part of our culture, whether we're in higher ed or in the larger environment.
Thank you, Sue. And Fran, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I agree with everything my colleagues have said. Also, I feel as though working from a disability office, disability is a weakness. It's the perception of a weakness. And our veterans don't really want to connect our students who have had negative experiences in high school. They don't want to have that experience again. And so they come in with a perception that this is like special ed. They're already coming in with mental health diagnoses, some comorbidity because of their learning disability and anxiety and depression, OCD. We have a lot of autistic students. So these students have rather been isolated. And the pressures in the world through social media, making them feel like they have to be better than they are or perfect, causes them to lack assertiveness, be disconnected, feel that they are weak, and that they don't want to disclose to anybody because their biggest obstacle is worrying about what other people think.
And so I do want to ask Brooke, so from your perspective, Brooke, as a student, why do you think there's so many barriers?
I definitely, I couldn't agree more with everyone what you just said. As a student who's diagnosed with anxiety and OCD, a huge issue surrounding mental health, the stigma especially, was going into college and being faced with the statistics and the success rates that they taught us about when it comes to students who do deal with mental health issues and whatnot. And with the anxiety of already taking that step to go into college, having that put on you as well, my mind automatically went, what if I don't meet the standard of what the college is looking for me? And I feel like a lot of students who do suffer with mental health issues, they do have that anxiety to begin with. And there's already a stigma that's already being placed on them when they're shown success rates, and they worry that they can't amount to it. And I think that's a huge issue when it comes to colleges and whatnot, because the colleges don't take into consideration each student's circumstance of where they came from, their learning styles, and what they may be dealing with.
If I can ask this, Brooke, just to follow up then, how did you manage to overcome that challenge yourself?
I had an amazing support group with my family, my mom. I've had counselors, my doctors. They told me, basically every college does have a requirement or standard that they wish for their students to meet education-wise, but you can't base yourself off of that because it's a generalized standard that they made for all their students to meet. And it's just not realistic for every student to hit that standard. And so I took my time, I did things on my terms, and I had people who helped me with that as well.
I love that. I did things on my terms. That's how
Yeah.
you do it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love it. So I do want to ask, again, this is a question for anyone who wants to respond. As far as I just mentioned the barriers. So what are some of the barriers that students face in college? I think certainly Brooke alluded to some of those. So would anybody else like to chime in about barriers that they see with their students?
Well, I feel that at the community college level, we're still, because we don't have a counseling center, we don't have licensed professionals on campus, I feel as though the students don't know where to go. Our counselors are more like advisors. And so they're not sure what to do. We're working on our websites. We're still in progress. We're developing a mental health program. I feel like mental health, the topic of mental health isn't really discussed as much. So we're working on that and developing that. I have been working hard on handing out cards for the Anti-Stigma Coalition to get people to understand what mental health stigma is. Our marketing needs to be improved. And so I think the students are confused. I think that they lack assertiveness and they're scared that they're going to be labeled as different.
And how about you, Sue? What do you think about this? Sue?
She's muted.
I think you're muted again, Sue.
So I apologize, everyone. Students who come from families that don't in some way communicate that mental health is something to consider, or they're actively saying that this is not something our family believes in or supports you doing. And it's more prevalent, you know, it's pretty common. And depending in certain parts of the, we have a lot of international students. We have students who are coming from different communities who may think that this isn't something to pursue. And we have students whose family won't agree for them to, for example, use pharmacological or medication support and things like that. So it's a huge barrier when your family of origin doesn't support this. So that's a huge barrier that we see a lot. Another thing that we see in students having access to counselors, because even though we have a counseling center here at UB, which is amazing and quite diverse and spends a lot of time related to creating access for students who have lots of different lived experiences, race, ethnicity, gender, orientation, all these, different ways that we experience the world, there's still more need than what we are able to provide. Now, at the bottom, we have a website for our counseling services, and at the bottom of that web page, there's 2 databases that people can search. Those are like exterior-facing databases, and people can search those for providers. But we know students are finding if they need further support off campus, it can be a wait right now to get a therapist. So that's a concern. But we've also, the other good news, I guess, from my perspective in terms of barriers, is we're seeing a much more dynamic, robust community support within the university system in terms of through health promotion, through tutoring and academic support, and through different student life initiatives. And we have a new Active Minds group within the last 2 years at UB, but that's a national level group that any student in any kind of post-secondary can become part of, but you can also have local groups. So we're seeing a little bit more access, but some of the still barriers. And just getting everyone talking about it and having multiple access points, I think, are the biggest solutions. So, and that's what I hear other people talking about too.
Thank you. So I do want to remind our audience, if you have a question, please feel free to type it into the comments and we will try to get to it. But we do have a question that I'd like to ask. So, and actually I'll throw this out to you, Kerry. So what would be a student's first step? What would they do if they feel they need any type of support related to their mental health on campus? And I think I'm asking you because certainly at Daemen you have counseling services and this would be, something that many students would be able to access.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what everyone just said really resonated with me and with the work I do, but most especially with what Brooke shared as far as sort of the expectations of the collegiate experience, academic expectations, and the rigor of class. I spend most of my time and most of my days normalizing that the college path is not straight and narrow, and there's no one way and one approach. And I probably say that 5 times a day to students. We have these assumptions that there's this one right answer to how we move forward in our collegiate experience. And I could not disagree more. And so I need students and families to really understand that this path forward has lots of ways. And I start that conversation right at orientation for our students. And here at Daemen, most of our students are able to access orientation and do take advantage of that. So I always say I speak out the hard things. What do we do if we fail our first class? Let's play that fear out to the end. Let's talk about what happens if you fail your class. And that's one of my favorite things to say. The other thing is control what we can control. So what can we do right now, right here in this moment? If we're talking at 5 o'clock on a Friday, let's talk about what can we do right here in this moment? What emails can we send? And then what's our plan for the rest of the weekend? So not a direct answer to your question, Karl, to the question from the audience, but the first step is layered for us here at Daemen. And certainly Sue talked about this with the approach at UB as well. But a student can call a lot of different access points for us. They can call campus safety 24/7. And they can also call residence life, and they can call our hall director on call or call our student affairs office. And you're always going to access someone. Here at Daemen, we have a really robust on-call system. And so there are many trigger points to that on-call system if a student needs help, and we are trained in how to respond to that help. We love our partners in crisis services if it's off hours. So I tell students that the world feels different at 2 p.m. as opposed to 2 a.m., but that doesn't mean there's not folks to talk to and to connect. So I firmly believe in talking about the hard stuff and a lot of different access points to mental health support and care. And I spend a lot of my time in trainings and conversations with students, families, as well as faculty and staff, letting them know there are folks here all the time ready to respond to you regardless of the time of day or night.
Excellent. Thank you so much. That was a great answer. So, Anita, I want to bring you into the conversation. So, as a mom, and of course, moms, and I think dads and parents and caregivers and family support their student. And so, how have you been a support to Brooke? How did you help her? Because, of course, Brooke said herself that, family, you and your family were great support. How do you do that?
I often tease Brooke that 3 of us actually earned her degree. Brooke, myself, and an awesome advisor, Josephine, that worked with us. Basically, the support for Brooke started when she was diagnosed in middle school, and I was brought into all of that as an advocate for Brooke. And we just continued that once we went into college, and no one really wants to bring their mom with them to college. And it's expected that at college, we found they wanted the students to take their education into their own hands.
I brought you everywhere.
And kind of handle it. But for someone who has anxiety like she does, that was part of the stigma for her. She didn't know how to do that on her own. She was very intimidated. And sometimes the student themselves can bring on the stigma of not wanting other people to know, or not wanting to be different, or she got a plan when she was younger that followed her up through a 504 plan, which was awesome. And it just allowed her to work at her own pace, like Kerry said, and her path was different. It went through 2 different schools because the first school we had, she just couldn't be successful. They just weren't able to help her through a lot of different channels. But once we found our way, she's graduated, and it starts every day, just getting her medicated, in the car, calm, and ready for school to face the day. And that was my challenge every single day.
Every
for
day.
2 years.
Yeah,
2 years.
every day.
So it's a nonstop process, and it goes on today.
But it just points to the fact that with that support, a student can be successful. And there's multiple parts to that
Absolutely.
success.
Yeah.
Family support is a huge one. So I just want to let our viewers know, if you're just tuning in, I'm Karl Shallowhorn from the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition. I'm joined here by Mann, Dolce, who is Associate Director of the UB Accessibility Resources Office, Kerry Spicer, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Daemen College, Francis Moyer from Erie Community College, and Brooke Ketterer, graduate from the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute, and her mom, Anita Ketterer. So remember, you can visit our website at letstalkstigma.org to take the pledge to end stigma. Also, if you're connected with a business, organization, or faith community, you can become an organizational member of the coalition. You can find more information about this on our website under the Members tab. So there's a question that came up, and I wanted to just read out here. says, what if a student is fearful to go to the counseling center to seek out counseling? Perhaps they don't want to be seen going in and coming out of where they're a new student. Also, the concern that communication shared with a college therapist could in some way impact their experience on campus. Are there off-site options or virtual options, or can they make a referral for a therapist off campus, even if not affiliated with the school? So I'm going to throw that out to Sue. And she's going to unmute herself.
She's got it.
See, it takes 3 times for me. So thanks, Karl. Yes, there are telehealth options if students don't want to be in person at the counseling center. That is always an option. And, you know, we're grateful to COVID that made that even more realistic in a lot of ways. So that's been a really good thing in terms of access. And in terms, all counselors work under HIPAA, so everything's confidential. There's always going to be, if there is a concern related to safety, all of us are designated reporters. So of course, but we would always say that to a student. There would be no surprises related to that, of course. And students are more than welcome to seek outside support. Probably 50% of the students that I work with here through our office, I would say 90 to 100% of the students that I work with at any given moment have mental health issues, sometimes in addition to multiple other disabilities. And it's 50-50 whether they're getting support on campus or getting support off campus. When I say support, I mean the professional psychological support. So that is really essential and really important. But there's a lot of other support, and we often find that students will enter, like what Kerry was saying, is that they'll start by talking with her, and she's hearing things and she's gently suggesting, you might want to call, you know, counseling services or this support or that support. So we're all, you know, these multiple entry points. You know, sometimes I'm sure Fran and Kerry experience this too. Well, we'll work with a student for a whole semester before they can approach counseling, that they feel comfortable. We can work with them in these practical ways. And so at least within our office, we don't do anything clinical, but we certainly can work in these really practical, supportive ways, but we also stay within our scope. So I would never try to do counseling. That's not what I do. But when students may be requesting that in like through me, because they in some way get used to working with me, I'll always say, oh, you deserve to have a qualified person to support you with that. That's more of a counseling thing. And don't forget, you can call there anytime. Or you could go off campus, or you could talk to your parents or whatever. So we're always thinking of, what we are always saying to students is, any adult who's successful figures out what support they need, figures out how to access it, and then uses it. And it's the same with mental health issues. So we're always encouraging that model and reinforcing that model. And this idea, it's, you know, a lot of students think they have to do it all on their own. I don't know where, you know, I think our culture mentions and, you know, messages that a lot to us, that, you know, we need to be independent, but I think most of us know as adults that that's not really the way it is. Like, we really need a lot of support. All of us do. And when you have mental health issues, especially when they're pretty acute, you really need a lot of support. But that often tends to be when you're least able to reach out for it. So it's going to be the people closest to you that can nudge you. That's why we try to get people to get support and set up when they're feeling pretty good, so that if symptoms do increase, then they have those support systems in place. But where the support is, that's up to the student. If they're going off campus for support, then of course, then it would go through their own insurance if there's an insurance issue. If they're on campus, that's covered through their activity fee. So there can be some financial considerations, which of course we always have to think about.
Thanks. That's a great answer. So I do want to ask, I want to ask Fran. So, and this is from a recent survey published by Mental Health America. It said that 70% of those college students surveyed stated they have not received any academic accommodations, and only 20% stated that they did not want them. So there's a disconnect between those that say they haven't had them and those that state they do not want them. That's a pretty large disparity. So Frances, like, why do you think that's the case?
Well, I'm familiar with that survey, and I agree with it. And I'm going to go back again to number one, a lack of knowledge. Students avoid connecting. They don't know where to go. They don't want to be labeled. They look at having to have an accommodation as a weakness, and instead of it's a weakness that can be turned into a strength, and so that they're on an equal playing field with all the other students, and they have just as much opportunity to be successful in college. Low self-worth, a lack of assertiveness, a lack of understanding how to connect with each other and even communicate what their needs are. So they feel like they don't know where to go, they're confused, they feel like they're on their own. And some of them just say, no, I'm never going to use those accommodations again. I had a bad experience in life before college, and I'm not going to experience it again, because they don't understand that college is different from high school. So I think all of those factors come into play with students who lack the knowledge to seek the assistance that they need. And also, if they're labeling themselves and walking around with their own label on them, they're already feeling defective and different.
Thank you. And I'll just have to say, I've worked in higher education myself for many years at Daemen, actually one of the places I've worked in the past. But I do know that many, say, high school students that are preparing for college have a misconception about the idea of seeking accommodations. And then, because when you go to college, you are your own person. I mean, your parents typically, unless you get in FERPA and all those other things that are involved, typically you have to advocate for yourself. Now, I know, of course, Brooke, you had your mom, and that's great. We want that support. But we also need to let students know that it's different, like you said, Frances. It's different when you go to college, and that you seek these supports on your own. And it does. I think that idea of autonomy can actually help a student. Anybody have a thought on that? Like how a sense that you're your own person? Because I think that's what many times students are looking for, is to become that person.
I think that, I see there's a question about, if a parent can call and make an appointment for their student in the counseling center. And I think that really speaks to what you just asked, Karl, or what you just mentioned. We talk about our restrictions on what we can talk about, but I can talk in general terms about process all the time. So I am happy to do that with families, to talk about general. That's why I started orientation, but certainly those phone calls continue throughout the entire year. So I will talk about, here's the general process for how your student would make an appointment for a counselor at our counseling center. Here's the general process for, you name it, I'm talking about it. So I don't expect that families who are coming in and navigating the system with their student understand the system. I will also say that every college has a different system, having worked at 3 different ones in the last almost 20 years. They're all very different. And, Brooke and Anita, you just said you tried 2 colleges first. And so you know firsthand that they're all very different. So I don't expect that just because we're coaching and helping families and students through the systems, that at some point they won't launch into being their own person and being able to navigate these systems themselves. But students don't know all of the behind the scenes things that we do to support them. I am co-chair of the CARE team, which is our behavioral intervention team here on campus. They don't necessarily know that the CARE team exists. I do tell them in orientation, but it's a lot of information. But they don't necessarily know that there is a team of people there for their care and support. And so that's something I share out often with students and families, that this team does exist. We honor the confidentiality of everybody's life experiences, but we are also there to support and help navigate them through those experiences. So just because if you're traditional start 17, 18, or if you're non-traditional start 30, 35, just because you're a college student doesn't mean that you automatically know everything at the snap of the finger. So teaching systems and process is half the battle.
That's great. And I do appreciate your answer there, Kerry, because obviously you're right. colleges are different. They do have different processes that students can go through, and it is it's like learning to navigate the system, and it can be very confusing, I know, from one place to the next. So that's excellent. I want to ask Brooke, going back to Brooke, you did share some of the things that allowed you to succeed and
Yes.
persist through college. Anything else that maybe you hadn't mentioned that really allowed you to really succeed and graduate?
Definitely. Of course, the support of my family and my advisors and whatnot, the team that worked at my college. But definitely the biggest thing that aids to being successful in college is having belief in yourself. It's easier said than done for a lot of people, and it was for me as well for a long time in my life. You have to be your biggest supporter. And so that means if you're struggling, you have to listen to yourself. If you're having a good day, recognize it. If you're having a bad day, recognize it, but then you learn from it and you move on from it. Of course, there will be people that will, ask you like, hey, what's going on? And of course, if you have that support group, feel free to share that and express that, but you have to be your biggest supporter. And through my work and the pride that I had when I saw the results of my work, it really drove me even more in seeing what I was capable of. I was living the life I wanted to live, not the life my mental health wanted me to live. So I took that step and I chose to be happy. I deserve, to live the life I want. And my mental health is only a small part of me, so there's so much more to me, and just being your biggest supporter. That's all I can say, really, being your biggest supporter, because everyone deserves to be successful.
That's amazing. I have to follow up because it just had me think about the idea of your friends.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm guessing you have friends. So,
yeah, a small group.
So how were your friends? How did your friends help you?
I mean, they were incredible. Like for the longest time in my life, I didn't talk about what I dealt with because, not a lot of people truly understand the extent of where my OCD goes to. So it can be confusing and it can be intimidating. And especially when I'm in my moments, it can be a lot for someone who doesn't understand. But with what I did share with my friends, it was the support I never knew I needed. I had myself and my family, and I thought I was set, but having that separate support system as friends and being able to go to them for comfort during the day when my mom couldn't be there or I couldn't talk to my doctor or anything like that, they checked in on me throughout my class. I mean, my classroom was a kitchen. So when it was getting hectic or we were being really busy, one of them would just tap me on the shoulder and say, hey, are you doing okay? And that meant a lot to me, being thought of. And it just takes that small gesture just to ask someone if they're doing okay. And it can mean the world to someone.
That's great. That's great to have that support as well.
Yeah.
And I want to ask, let's see, I'll go to, so Kerry, now you have residence life at Daemen, and it's a fully developed program. You have even international students, I know from my experience there. So what services and how do you prepare your staff? So you say for mental health crisis. A lot of parents, whether they have a student who may have a pre-existing condition going into college, or may have one while in college and returning, they're concerned about the staff, the residence hall directors and coordinators and so forth. How do you equip them?
So training is half the battle. In that we want to make sure we have an RA staff, so students, paraprofessional staff that we train beginning at the beginning of the year. Our campus safety I mentioned is 24/7, 365, so they are always here. They are trained with our residence life staff so that they have a great working relationship. I mentioned before we have a robust on-call system. So we have hall directors on call, administrators on call. So it's a director and dean level on call. And then I am always on call. So if things need to get to me, they get to me. But, my biggest thing with most of the things that I train folks on is that you don't always have to have the magic answers. You just have to know who to call. So we do get to a threshold if we're dealing with an issue that we're going to call somebody that is the appropriate support for someone. So specific to talking about a mental health issue or crisis moment, we have those supports in place and everyone knows to call up. So we will call up so that we get that student the appropriate help and support they need. Safety is the first and foremost, to make sure that everybody involved is safe. And then beyond that, it's about support. So we have our immediate response in residence life, and then we have the long-term planning. That is where I come in as the dean of students and the care team comes in to make a plan with our students for how they can be the most successful they can be while at college. So every situation is very unique, which is why we train and have such a robust layered system involved.
And I can certainly say myself, having worked at 3 different colleges that had residence life, including Daemen, that, yeah, you're right. These campuses and colleges do have training. They do have support that is meant to support and help a student at any time, whether it be a medical crisis or otherwise. So that's really important, I think, for our viewers to know as well. I want to go back to Sue and ask you about the idea of just the impact of the work that you do on your campus in terms of just providing students with an opportunity. We talked about success. So how impactful is your work? I know it's that may seem like a given, but tell us about that.
Great question, Karl. So impact, I think when I think of impact, I mean, we have numbers and all of the data, etc. I think the impact for me from a professional level is the outcomes on a day-to-day basis with the many students that I'm interacting with one-on-one, in families often too. So, and also doing, as Kerry mentioned, the training and the outreach and the support, and also creating programming. So, for example, through accessibility resources, we offer, starting next week, we'll be doing a midweek mind, body, breath yoga class on Wednesday and Thursday, just for students who use accessibility resources. Of course, there's plenty of other programming going on across campus, but we're talking to students about the things that they can do, like, again, referencing Kerry's, like, control the things that you can. So what are the personal wellness things that I can do that are going to support me to stay in as much balance as possible? But we're also messaging that to the faculty and staff, and we're referencing this in terms of mental health and referencing all our mental health. So I think that it's working from the specific and seeing what our students are experiencing, but then also normalizing that and pushing that out through the campus community in these ways that shows our common humanity, and creating programming that celebrates that and acknowledges it and speaks it, and in these very robust. I love that word, robust. I'm gonna take that one from you, Kerry, and or borrow it. And so to thinking about how we get people talking about these things, but again, as Brooke was saying, not from a deficit or negative model, but from this is how we experience life. My reference point is when I was undergrad, I had a really difficult mental health issue. This was in the 70s. People really didn't talk about it back then. Okay. It's pretty bad now, but it was like worse then, let's say. And so I know what made a difference for me. That's when I found yoga. That's why it's such an important part of my life, because I know not just yoga, but mind, body, breath. And we know about the relationship between the breath and the autonomic nervous system and stuff. Depending on who I'm talking with, I'll reference things in different ways. Trying to find a way to connect with that person or that group. But certainly we know everyone is struggling with these issues. COVID has made that extremely clear. So just connecting, creating connection, creating multiple entry points, and that's the impact. That's where I like to think. I don't think of it in terms of our office per se, but I do think that the students I work with on a daily basis, they motivate me to continue to doing this outreach and the support and thinking about and challenging them, because many of them are also going into health professions and professions. And I say, this difficult experience you're having right now is difficult, and you deserve the support you need to get to the next space, but it can also inform you as you move into your professional life. right? It's not, is, you know, as we're all keep referencing, it's not just bad or just negative, but yes, it is difficult, and I'm not going to hide that. And it can be pretty bumpy when you're trying to come back in and get back in a groove, or you're making a decision to take a break. These transition points can be really difficult. And just being there for each other and holding space for each other, and sometimes just breathing together, for goodness sakes, can make all the difference in the world. So that's where I think of the impact. It's from the specific individual out into the broader, and including everyone, opening and creating space for everyone within that framework.
And absolutely, and of course, that impact is not only at the time that the student is in college, but can go even beyond that into their professional careers, which is why they're in college, to prepare them for that. I want to ask, I want to go back to Anita. As a parent, what would you actually encourage and from your experience, tell other parents about what they could do to help their students prepare, or they may already be enrolled in college? What advice would you just give to a parent that's out there?
Make a plan. Brooke and I had a plan every day, and maybe it even starts before that. I like what Sue said about having it looked in a positive. When you're searching out a college to go to, and you look at academics, and you look at this social club, and you look at that, maybe the mental health should be one of those things that should be more prevalent, that the services that they could get. I know for Brooke and I, we always took a tour, not just of all the clubs she could join. We met the nurse who would end up being her best friend, met all of the advisors, because you go into college and they throw this big year syllabus at you, and it's very overwhelming, especially to somebody that has OCD or extreme anxiety. We had to break it up into small little chunks of things she could manage on a daily or weekly basis. And just because you're assigned an advisor by your last name, maybe that's not the right match for you. And you have to find your Josephine in the middle of a school, or whoever that person is. And they're your advocate. And we just attacked everything. And really, Brooke's responsibility was to make sure every class, every semester, the teacher was aware of her issues, so that you were proactive and not reactive to it. You don't want to wait till she's failing classes because she's having a panic attack and can't concentrate. The teacher should know, if I have to step out of the room for 5 minutes, I'm not being disrespectful. I just need to catch my breath, and then I can come back and think. So the best thing would be is to meet everybody and have a plan before they get there and something happens, because it's the fear of the unknown for Brooke. It was the worst part. It was set her off for the day.
I think having a plan is essential. That's a must. I do want to go back to Brooke though and ask a question. This is as you're comfortable.
Yes, of course.
Answer about, you mentioned before about taking medication.
Yes.
As far as an essential part of your own, as I like to call it, toolkit.
Yes.
How would you describe that as being an element in your success going through school, and how do you incorporate that into your own lifestyle?
Well, without medication, I couldn't function properly the way I needed to. My mind was running 24 hours a day. I was having anxiety left and right, and it was frustrating. And I think I can speak on behalf of my mom and I that when we were first introduced to the idea of taking medication, we were nervous. We didn't know how I was going to react, or, if this was going to be long term. But we learned over time that this is only to help and to help you function. It won't take, anything away. Unfortunately, there is no magic pill that will take any of the struggles away or anything like that. You have to do the hard work. But the medication helps aid that and just keeps you at bay so you can function, so you can be productive in what you have to do every day to live, to work, to do school. So yeah, there was a stigma that I faced with multiple people, even close, family and friends when it comes to medication. But I can only focus on myself. I can't focus on what everyone else thinks, because this medication helps me live my life the way I need to and the way that I want to.
Bravo. That's all I have to say is bravo.
Thank
Fran,
you.
Actually, this is for Fran, Sue, and Kerry. as far as the question came up, and a reminder of viewers, we have just a few minutes left, but if you have a question, feel free to put in the comments. Veterans. I know veterans are certainly welcomed on college campuses. So what about services for veterans in terms of mental health supports? Anybody can chime in.
So we have veterans who come through the Student Access Center who need accommodations. We also have a veteran center here at the college that's run by Dan Frontiera, who is a veteran himself. We have it on all 3 campuses. And so as long as they stay connected, their support system is pretty strong here. A lot of them have difficulties in the classrooms with PTSD. So those students are accommodated. They're allowed to have breaks and leave the classroom if they need to. We have note takers that can assist with note taking so they don't miss any of their lectures. So the veterans are just well esteemed on campus and have a great support system, as well as all of the other departments on campus who support them.
Thanks. I want to move ahead to this next question, and then I'm going to give a little time for each of you to make some closing comments, because we are actually getting closer to time to end. So I'm going to ask Kerry, for a parent who's trying to support their student from a distance, what would you recommend?
I think, I love listening to Brooke and Anita because I understand the journey as a parent. So because I understand the journey as a parent, I can use a lot of that empathy to connect with families. To support from a distance, again, I try to start at the beginning and enable where do I find content? Where do I find the student handbook? Where do I find residence life policies? So that if your student is calling you in a panic, I always use the 2 p.m., 2 a.m. They're usually not calling you at 2 p.m. Generally, it's 2 a.m. So that's a little alarming. But I think that, being prepared that I always say this, college is this, and that is normal. And there are going to be moments where you are not okay, where you didn't pass a test, or you feel overwhelmed. You've read your syllabi for all your classes and think, oh, dear God, how am I going to handle all of this? Right? So there's all these really normal moments. But as a family member, how do I support my student through that? So that is controlling what you can control and playing your fear out to the end, right? So we talk in that one moment about what happens next. What are we worried about? And let's, as a family member, as a parent, how do we work through this? And where do you go for support? Academic support here at Daemen, go to the Student Success Center and we have academic coaching. Mental health support, we've talked a lot about that. But sometimes the student just saying out loud that they're in a panic moment is going to help probably take 50% of that panic away, talking to a supportive family member. And then beyond that, again, parents and families don't have to know everything. They just have to know who to ask, where to go, and then say to your student, let's make a plan for the rest of tonight, and then let's make a plan for tomorrow. So tomorrow, what can we do? We can send emails tonight, and tomorrow we can follow up with phone calls. But working through what offices can support them and what can happen next is, I think, the key, and being really in it with them and talking to them about it. And that's what we're doing on the college campus as well. All of us have just talked about how we're doing it. So even hearing my voice saying out loud, this is what I do every day, so that parents and families on your side of things do the same thing. And then we've got your student. We've got them, and we'll work them through whatever the next step in their life experience is going to be.
Thank you. That was a wonderful answer. So I do know we're almost out of time. So I want to offer each of you about a minute to maybe offer some closing remarks about our topic today. So let's just start with Sue. Sue, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, I want to just piggyback a little bit on what Kerry just said. The other thing that I often say to parents, as a parent myself, is, and I, gently say this, but I also say, please make sure you're supporting yourself. And by modeling that for your student, for your child, that's probably one of the most powerful things that you can do, is you can say, I'm concerned about you, and I sometimes need support because I worry about you, kind of thing. Sometimes students don't think about that. And when parents can demonstrate that they seek out support too, that can give their child permission to do that also. So that, of course, in addition to everything Kerry said, which was very comprehensive, mostly I'm just going to say, figure out what support you need. And if, whomever on campus can provide that for you. And I know certainly, and I know Fran and Kerry work this way too. If someone contacts me and I'm not the appropriate person, I will make sure that before that student leaves that they're connected with the person that they need to. I'm not going to send them there. I'm not sending them to a website. I'm going to make the phone call or in some way make sure that they're making contact. Whether it's we're emailing them together or whatever it is. So utilize the people that are there for you. And you don't have to know the right person because we tend to know each other. So we can support you in that. So, but you do have to make the first step. We often don't know that you're struggling. So making that first step is really the most important thing. And it's one of the hardest steps to take, but it's so significant. And also, Karl, thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this.
Thank you. Fran, close comments.
Well, Karl, I want to thank you for this opportunity also. And I have this picture in my mind of a circle of people with their hands connected. And we are all together, accepting each other just the way we are, with an inclusive perspective that we're all unique individuals. Social connectedness is so important for us, and it's the theme of this department, to be connecting to our students, to helping our students to grow and learn, and having that plan. I love the word plan. I heard it so much from Sue, and I love that word plan. Part of our motivational interviewing and coaching training that we've been going through. And also having 2 students from the UB School of Social Work working with our students as peers. I think that helping our students to learn how to be strong enough to stand alone and intelligent enough to know when they need help and brave enough to ask for help is the most important thing we can do for our students.
Thank you. Kerry, last remark.
It said it in my description, but I am a firm believer in how wonderful the college experience can be for someone. And I love everything about being on a college campus, and I love being a part of a student's journey, even for a small sliver of time that I get to be. I have always said that since I started in higher education. So I want to thank Brooke and Anita for sharing your story, and for Sue for sharing your story. I think that we have to start saying these things out loud and sharing these stories out loud, because everyone can just take a moment and take a breath and realize, okay, it's not just me. And we, as Fran just said, we are a collective moving forward. So that student experience looks different on everybody, and it doesn't matter at what place you need to have it. And learning and being a student doesn't always have to happen on a college campus either. So I'm incredibly grateful for the work that I get to do every day and working with my students every day. I'm really thankful to be a part of this wonderful conversation and to continue doing this work moving forward. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Anita.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you including us in it and letting us tell you a little bit about our experience. And I'm just so impressed with all of the programs and different things that students can take advantage of with all of the ladies that have all of their curriculum here today. And it's just really encouraging what's available if they just ask, and it's start the conversation, just ask. They can't help you if they don't know.
And Brooke, I'm going to leave the last word to you.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you so much for letting me be a part of this. This was absolutely incredible, and I'm very honored to have had this conversation with you all. This is something that hits home, and I take, great care with it. And if I can just help one person, then it's worthwhile. The biggest thing that I want to put out there is that the bravest thing a person can do is ask for help when they're the most vulnerable. It's scary, but it's extremely brave. And if you have done that in the past, you should be very proud of yourself. Each step you take each day, even if it's getting out of bed, it's progress and you're doing great. And no matter how alone you feel, especially when it comes to the college experience, there will always be someone that will help you, and they will work on your terms to create a plan that will just keep you for success and just, gear you towards success. And just most of all, everything will be okay. That's the biggest thing. Everything will be okay.
That's great. So thank you for everyone for being here. I want to thank our panelists, Dolce, who is the Associate Director of the UV Accessibility Resources Office, Kerry Spicer, Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Daemen College, Fran Moyer from Disability Services at Erie Community College, Brooke Ketterer, graduate from the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute, and her mom, Anita Ketterer. As a reminder to our audience, we need you to take the pledge to end stigma by joining our website at letstalkstigma.org. If your organization would like to join us in our cause, there's information on the website on how you can do that. Just click on the members tab to find out how. And together, we can make this happen. So I'd also like to thank the folks behind the scenes, Mike Telesco from Telesco Creative Group for his hard work on getting us up and running, Matt Smith, Chair of the Anti-Stigma Coalition Outreach Committee, and Carol Doggett and Karen Karaszewski from the Medical Advocates and KKPR Public Relations as well for their support. Be sure to tune in to our next Facebook Live, The State of Stigma, Depression Screening and Seeking Treatment on October 14th. And then on November 11th, we'll have The State of Stigma, How Trauma and Stigma Affect Veterans Across Generations. And lastly, we're going to have a Facebook Live in December. And if you would like to have your idea shared and focused for that topic, please put a comment in what you would like to have for that topic. We're looking for ideas. So please let us know your interest in our December Facebook Live. So on behalf of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition, until next time, I'm Karl Shallowhorn. Be well.